everyone, and this is Sarah Quinn. I'm the Vice President of Connect Media, and I'm joined today for an ESG Intelligence conversation brought to you by EBI. Will Duggan, ESG Program Manager at EBI Consulting, and Joe DeTizio, Associate Director of ESG Client Services, join us today, and we're going to be talking a little bit about ESG in the commercial real estate space. Gentlemen, ESG has become this key talking point on everything that's been happening over the last 2 years, and it's really become a key talking point in the conversation around risk management. What should commercial property owners be paying attention to as it comes to ESG?
Well, Sarah, I can help answer that. The first question to introduce with commercial property owners and managers is what step of the ESG process are they in, and what is the motivating factor for them pursuing the ESG journey, as we call it. The first areas where we're able to discuss, where EBI can help and where the focus typically needs to be on is, benchmarking, if they haven't already started the process, benchmarking where their company and their portfolios are performing in terms of ESG. And then the typical next step in this process is to focus on areas of improvement, typically pertaining to energy efficiency, reduction of carbon emissions, and that's portfolio wide, as well as identifying physical risks due to climate change. And again, that falls in step with the benchmarking of where the portfolio, where the company is today. And of course, to then identify the best, most cost-effective way to move forward throughout this process of the ESG reporting.
So those are all things that you lay out at the very beginning. Are you looking for quick wins as you're putting together an ESG program? And are you looking for immediate ROI? Or do you feel like you're putting together a program that's a little bit more holistic and knowing that it's something that you're going to be working with your clients on for a long term?
So, ESG is a very complex topic, right? There's a million different factors that are pulled in to report and, of course, improve upon with ESG. So in terms of return on investment and, what we call low-hanging fruit, where the clients are looking to improve, that is typically where we begin. We want to make ESG not only work for the clients, but also work for their existing business model. We want there to be a focus on the services and products that can give them an improved, NOI, net operating income, or of course, improve the resiliency and efficiency of their assets. So we typically will key in where EBI is best known for, which is our engineering capabilities and environmental capabilities, and identify the best, what I would say the best areas to improve them in the ESG world, as well as help improve their business structure and model.
What's the client takeaway as you're explaining whether there's going to be a return or not? What's the takeaway from that first meeting? How's everyone feeling?
Well, fortunately for us, we come from a company with over 30 years of, commercial real estate engineering and environmental services. Therefore, we know very well the services that do result in payback and return on investment that we would recommend to pursue first and foremost. And that conversation is typically an easygoing one because we are helping the clients in two ways at the same time. If they're an ESG reporting client, they need to do these services eventually. And by bringing to attention those services at the onset, we're able to, of course, improve how they're already operating, give them an immediate benefit to their operations and their business model, as well as starting this process and taking on the bigger initiatives at the same time to get them improving with their ESG performance. So with our business sense and our company background and experience, we are able to offer the best of both worlds kind of thing, because we've seen the opposite where, ESG centric consultants or ESG reporting firms, which don't have the capabilities that EBI has, the technical capabilities in-house, will be looking at the ESG journey or process through a different lens than we do. We understand our clients, we understand real estate, and we understand how to best proceed in this ESG world.
Great. Will, I want to bring you into this conversation. What are some of the main concerns that you're hearing from clients as they're starting their ESG journey?
Yeah, so they're concerned about, I'd say first and foremost, their audience. a lot of companies aren't necessarily, some of them are, but a lot of them aren't proactively pursuing ESG when they start off. They've heard it from an investor, they've heard it from a regulator. They've seen some kind of pending risk on the horizon that ESG is going to have to be used to kind of account for. So they're really focused on what their audience is asking them. That might be, an investor is requiring them to implement climate risk and ESG considerations in due diligence for new acquisitions. And an investor may be expecting them to report to, a well-known real estate ESG benchmark like GRESB, the Global Real Estate Sustainability Benchmark. For regulators, they might, have properties in a city that is going to be facing, has fines coming on the horizon, like Berto 2.0, Boston property owners of over, a certain 20,000 square foot, I believe, 20,000 square foot buildings, I believe, are going to have to account for energy efficiency components and meet emissions requirements in order to kind of avoid fines. You see the same thing in New York with Local Law 97. And then finally, there's publicly traded companies too that, see mandates from the SEC on the horizon with kind of disclosing their physical risk exposure to climate change, kind of the need to start disclosing scope 1 through 3 emissions on their portfolios. So the first thing they're really concerned about is what their audience is asking them to look into. Beyond that, there's internal factors too. So ESG, the concept of it, at its core, it's really just to be able to evaluate a different level of risk that can advise decision making and can kind of advise sustainable ways to grow a more resilient business. So some companies see ESG as a huge opportunity to differentiate themselves. An example may be a company has a large portion of their portfolio in areas that are facing, water stress in the future. They want to get to that and understand that risk today so that they can start to, hire an EBI to go on site and do an energy and water efficiency audit, or to go in and kind of implement, sustainable upgrades to the landscape of the building that's going to capture more water. If they're doing that and the property across the street isn't doing that, then if water taxes and water prices rise in the next 20 years, then their building's going to be positioned to be more resilient and to kind of operate the way that it's positioned to operate in the long term. So we see that those two sides of it is, one, how are we responding to our audience? And two, how are we using ESG to differentiate ourselves and kind of create a competitive advantage for our business model and for our properties in the long run?
I think you brought up a really interesting point, which is the who is driving these ESG goals and changes. As you think about your clients and the way that they are approaching changes to their properties, what do you think the how is? What are the first steps that clients are taking, and how are they making these changes to get started on an ESG program?
Yeah. Again, I mean, all companies kind of have different strategies, have different ways that they look to get started. The answer is, it's not a perfect answer. It's never too late to get started. There's no bad way to get started, but a lot of the best ways you can really start to benchmark your performance and kind of understand the sustainability of your portfolios can also be ways that, in 1 to 2 years are going to have a payback, right? So one could be, let's benchmark the energy and greenhouse gas and water performance of our portfolio. And then let's implement quick changes to those properties, whether it be a, energy audit, energy modeling services, water audits. Let's understand how these buildings can get better today. And these are no cost upgrades that you can implement to the building that's going to really allow you to see an ROI immediately in the first couple of years, right? So not only are you getting a benchmark for this ESG information and for the performance of your properties, but it's a productive benchmark because you're understanding ways to save money in the long run as well. We've also seen companies that are publicly traded, first and foremost, prioritize what they see the SEC is going to mandate them to do in the coming years, right? So that would be a kind of physical risk and resiliency assessment of your entire portfolio, seeing, which properties are at risk of flooding, which properties are at risk of wildfires. The list goes on. Any natural hazard that's being kind of, exponentially increased in severity due to climate change and frequency due to climate change, understanding how those threats kind of are posed towards your portfolio, and also being able to disclose that, right? So getting out in front of those regulations is another good way. And when you think about it, if you find out that an asset's at risk of flooding and you make a change today, so you hire a civil engineer to come on site and understand how the stormwater drainage system is going to be able to withstand certain risks, and you realize something, this part of the building may be at risk as soon as today, you could save yourself millions of dollars in implementing resilient improvements before it's too late, right? And your tenants are going to be able to continue to pay their rent. They're not going to have to leave the building. It's really a good strategy for improving resiliency, but also making sure that, as I like to say, these buildings are operating the way that you intended them to when you came into ownership of them.
So it's never too late, and you should be proactive as you're getting started.
Absolutely. Not only is it never too late, but it's never, you can't go big enough on ESG, I'd say, especially at the beginning.
I think the ESG conversation right now is really focused around those who are mandated by the SEC and are big institutional owners. What kind of ESG advice would you give to smaller commercial owners or those who are not necessarily in our, CBD Class A offices, thinking about retail, multifamily, industrial? How can you be proactive with ESG there?
Yeah, well, I think for a smaller kind of real estate investor, first and foremost, you don't have as many buildings in your portfolio. So if something happens to one of them, it's going to impact you a lot more than it would a larger company, right? So you're going to want to take the time to understand those risks. And, even if there's, an energy improvement measure that you implemented into one of these buildings, that extra money that you're going to have in your pocket because you're saving it on energy costs is going to go a much longer way than these larger real estate owners, right? So that's one side of it. The second is, if you want to grow, if you want to attract investors, if you want to be able to turn into, a real estate giant, then these core funds that you're going to get get that money from are looking at what you're doing for ESG. They're looking at your strategy. Some of our clients who are just getting started off on ESG, they are those small shops, and they see the importance of really disclosing what they're doing to understand the ESG risks and opportunities of their properties today, because they see it as kind of a barrier for entry for them being able to take that next step and grow, because they understand that the funds they need to get there are contingent on seeing that they have a good, well-rounded ESG plan.
Well, I can, and spot on, Will. What I can do to just kind of synthesize that is we look at ESG for those mid-market or mid-sized firms as two motivators for them to pursue an ESG reporting or ESG journey, right? One is, as Will said, to attract additional equity. A lot of the larger institution or pension funds actually have ESG requirements. So if that's a concern, or if that's a motivating factor to attract that equity, ESG needs to be in your company's model. On the flip side, ESG, as we've talked about, is a forcing mechanism in a sense to have you look at a different way to operate, right? It requires you to do these services that we've been talking about for a while in this conversation, but also as a company that benefit your business model, that directly benefit your operations, your cash flow, your resiliency. They impact you in a positive way, even though they are mandated by pursuing ESG reporting, right? So there's two sides to it. It's that we want to do it because we want to attract more money or have to do it. Or the second side is we want to do it because we understand the peripheral benefits that are direct to our bottom line by pursuing ESG.
Great. I appreciate you guys being a part of this conversation. This was really enlightening, and hopefully our audience will be able to get in touch with you guys and start this ESG conversation. Thanks for joining us.